The planet 442b was a quiet world. Green fields stretched across its surface. Rivers cut through valleys where children played and farmers worked their land. The colony had no name except home to the 80,000 humans who lived there. 300 years ago, their ancestors had left Earth on a ship called the Prometheus. They had traveled in frozen sleep for generations, hopping to find a new world. They found one. They built homes, planted crops, and raised families. They forgot about the stars above them and focused on the soil beneath their feet. Stood on her porch and watched the sunset paint the sky orange and purple. She was 62 years old, the elected director of the colony, and she had never seen a spaceship in her life. None of them had. The Prometheus had been taken apart long ago, its metal used to build their first buildings. That changed on a Tuesday afternoon. The ship that appeared in their sky was massive. It was white and gold, shaped like a teardrop, and it blocked out the sun as it descended. Remembered running outside with everyone else, staring up at the impossible thing above them. The who stepped off the ship were tall and beautiful. They had silver skin that seemed to glow and eyes like liquid gold. They moved with grace that made humans look clumsy. Their leader introduced himself as ambassador, and he smiled as he spoke. "We are the hegemony," he announced to the gathered crowd. "We have ruled this galaxy for 12,000 years. You are now part of our empire." Push through the crowd to face him. "We are humans from Earth. We have our own government, our own laws. We are not part of anyone's empire." Looked down at her with amusement. "Earth, that primitive world. We your species centuries ago. You had not even left your own planet. You are children playing in the dirt." "Then contact Earth," said firmly. "Speak to our government, we have rights." The ambassador laughed. The sound was musical and cruel. "Rights are for civilized species. You are resources to be used. Your people will work in our mines, our factories, our farms. You should be grateful. We are giving you purpose." Felt cold fear in her stomach, but she did not back down. "We refuse, leave our world." His beautiful face did not change expression as he raised his hand. A beam of light shot from his palm and struck in the chest. She fell to the ground, dead before she landed. The screaming started then. The soldiers moved through the colony like ghosts. They did not hurry. They did not need to. Their weapons made human resistance meaningless. Anyone who fought back died. Anyone who ran was caught. Was a farmer. He watched his wife fall to an alien weapon while protecting their 2 daughters. He grabbed the girls and ran into the forest, joining dozens of other survivors who hid in the trees. They did not chase them. They did not need to. Over the following days, hunger and thirst drove most survivors back to the colony. The aliens were waiting with chains. Processing was efficient. Families were separated. The young and strong were marked for heavy labor. The old and weak were marked for disposal. Children were taken to be raised as servants, their human names erased and replaced with numbers. Thomas was the colony's historian. He was 70 years old, too old for labor, scheduled for termination in the morning. But Thomas had one secret they did not know. Deep in the basement of the old community center, hidden behind a false wall, sat a piece of equipment from the original Prometheus. It was an emergency beacon, preserved by historians for 3 centuries as a relic of their journey. Thomas had always thought it was just a museum piece, a dead machine from a dead past. But Thomas was an old man with nothing to lose. He crawled through the ruins of his town that night, avoiding patrols. His bones ached and his heart pounded, but he kept moving. When he reached the community center, he found the beacon exactly where it had always been. He did not know if it would work. He did not know if anyone would hear it. But as soldiers kicked down the door and dragged him away, Thomas saw a single green light blink on. The beacon was transmitting. Oversaw the loading of the first transport ships with satisfaction. The humans were weaker than expected, but they would serve. Every species served the hegemony eventually. It was the natural order of things. He recorded his report with pride. Colony acquisition complete. Approximately 80,000 specimens secured. 37 eliminated during pacification. Native leadership terminated. No complications expected. 6,000 light-years away, in the cold darkness between stars, the beacon's signal traveled at impossible speed through a network of relay stations that they had never detected. It bounced from hidden satellite to hidden satellite, crossing the galaxy in minutes instead of. On Earth, in a mountain buried deep beneath the surface of the moon, a computer that had waited 300 years for this moment suddenly woke up. Alarms began to sound. General Sarah was reviewing fleet readiness reports when her communication device buzzed with the highest priority alert. She read the message 3 times before she believed it. Prometheus Colony LOCATED. Emergency Beacon ACTIVATED. Hostile Contact. Mass CASULTIES INDICATED. Sarah closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She was 60 years old, the supreme commander of the Terran Defense Force, and she had trained her entire life for a moment she hoped would never come. She opened a channel to the Confederacy Council. "This is General. Activate Protocol Prometheus. Wake up the fleet." Across the solar system, lights began to turn on in places that had been dark for decades. In the asteroid belt, massive doors opened in rocks that were not rocks at all. On the dark side of the moon, engines that had never fired began their startup sequences. In orbit around Saturn, ships that looked like weapons given form began to move. 40,000 warships, 30 million soldiers, 200 years of preparation. The beacon's data included visual recordings from the colony's security systems. Sarah watched the footage with a face of stone. She saw die. She saw families torn apart. She saw children screaming for parents they would never see again. When the footage ended, Sarah stood in silence for a long moment. Then she began to give orders. The Terran Navy did not announce its departure. There were no speeches, no declarations of war, no demands for justice. The ships simply formed into fleets, oriented toward a distant point in space, and vanished into faster-than-light travel. 40,000 ships, 30 million humans, moving in absolute silence toward an empire that did not know they existed. On the bridge of the flagship Prometheus Reborn, Admiral James, Sarah's son, stood at the main display and studied the star charts showing hegemony territory. "How long until we reach their border?" he asked. 72 hours, Admiral." James nodded slowly. He thought about the colony, about the people who had waited 300 years for help that never came, about the children who were now slaves because the galaxy was ruled by monsters. "All ships," he said quietly, "maintain radio silence. We do not stop, we do not negotiate, we do not show mercy until they have earned it." The fleet moved through the darkness between stars, a tide of steel and fury that the hegemony could not imagine. They had ruled for 12,000 years. They had crushed 100 species. They believed they were gods. They were about to learn otherwise. 200 years before the Prometheus colony fell, Earth had been a world divided. Nations fought over resources. Governments argued over borders. Humanity looked at the stars and dreamed, but they could not agree on how to reach them. Then the listening stations heard something. It was not a greeting. It was not an invitation. It was a military transmission, intercepted by accident, describing the conquest of a species called the recording detailed everything. The initial contact, the demands for submission, the systematic enslavement, the execution of anyone who resisted. The message ended with a simple statement: another inferior species brought to proper service. The hegemony grows stronger. For the first time in human history, every nation on Earth agreed on something. They were not alone in the universe, and the universe was ruled by monsters. The change happened quickly. Old arguments about borders and resources suddenly seemed small and foolish. Within 10 years, the Terran Confederacy was born, a unified human government with a single purpose: survival. Scientists worked together across former enemy nations. Resources flowed to research centers instead of military bases. The greatest minds in human history focused on one goal: faster-than-light travel. They succeeded in 50 years. The first FTL-capable ship, the Herald, made its test flight in secret. It jumped to a nearby star system and returned with data that changed everything. FTL was possible. The galaxy was within reach. But the Confederacy Council did not celebrate. They had a decision to make. Director Wei stood before the council and presented the options. We can announce ourselves to the galaxy. We can seek trade and diplomacy. We can try to make friends among the stars. And if the hegemony notices us, someone asked, then we will be slaves. The council debated for 3 days. Some wanted to hide. Some wanted to fight. Some wanted to try diplomacy. In the end, they chose something different. They chose to wait. We will not hide forever, Director announced. But we will not reveal ourselves until we are ready. We will watch. We will learn. We will build. And when we finally step onto the galactic stage, we will step as equals, not as victims. The silent centuries began. Human spy satellites spread across hegemony space, tiny and hidden, watching everything. Human agents, disguised with advanced technology, walked on alien worlds and gathered intelligence. Human analysts studied every hegemony battle, every tactic, every weapon. And human engineers built ships. Not exploration vessels, not trading craft, not diplomatic transports. They built warships. The first generation of Terran warships was crude but effective. The second generation was refined, incorporating lessons learned from observing hegemony technology. The third generation was something new entirely: ships designed specifically to destroy vessels. Admiral, the architect of the Terran Navy, explained his philosophy to the council. The hegemony builds beautiful ships. They build ships meant to intimidate, to demonstrate superiority. We will build ugly ships. We will build ships that do one thing and do it well: kill. The shipyards were hidden in asteroids, in the rings of Saturn, in hollowed-out moons. From Earth, the solar system looked peaceful and quiet. Beneath the surface, humanity was building an army. Recruitment was never a problem. Every human learned about the hegemony in school. They saw the recordings of slave markets, of execution grounds, of species worked to extinction. They understood what waited for them if they were discovered. Young men and women volunteered by the millions. They trained in simulators based on captured hegemony data. They practiced tactics designed to overwhelm and destroy. They knew they might never fight, might live their entire lives preparing for a war that would not come. They prepared anyway. The decades passed. Generations of soldiers trained and retired without firing a shot. Generations of scientists improved the ships, the weapons, the armor. Generations of leaders maintained the secret, waiting for the day when humanity would either be discovered or choose to reveal itself. Some grew impatient. We should strike first, they argued, destroy the hegemony before they find us. The council always refused. We will not start a war of conquest. We will not become what we hate. But if they touch our people, if they harm what is ours, we will end them. Then the beacon activated. Admiral James had grown up hearing stories about the Prometheus colony. Every child did. They were the lost ones, the forgotten ones, the humans who had traveled to the stars before anyone else and vanished into the void. Now they were slaves. James stood on the bridge of the Prometheus Reborn and watched the beacon footage for the 10th time. He saw colony director murdered for demanding to be treated as a person. He saw children torn from their parents. He saw old men and women marked for death because they could not work. "Sir," His first officer, Commander Lisa, approached carefully. "The fleet is ready. All 40,000 ships report green status." James did not look away from the screen. "How many humans did the hegemony enslave?" "Approximately 80,000, sir. Current status unknown." "And how many species has the hegemony enslaved in total?" "Our intelligence estimates suggest over 100 species have been conquered. Total enslaved population is estimated at 60 billion sentient beings." James finally turned away from the footage. His face was calm, but his eyes burned. "We spent 200 years watching them. 200 years seeing what they do to anyone weaker than themselves. 200 years telling ourselves we were just waiting for the right moment." He walked to the main display showing the fleet formation. 40,000 ships, each one carrying hundreds of humans who had trained their entire lives for this moment. The right moment is now. The fleet moved in perfect formation, ship after ship jumping to FTL in synchronized waves. They crossed the galaxy in silence, no transmissions, no signals, nothing for hegemony sensors to detect. In those 72 hours of travel, James received reports from across the fleet. Weapon systems were checked and rechecked. Marines prepared their armor and weapons. Medical bays stocked supplies for casualties they hoped would be minimal but expected to be severe. And in quiet corners of every ship, humans prayed, meditated, or simply sat in silence thinking about what was coming. Commander found James alone in his quarters, staring at a photograph of his mother as a young officer. "Sir, we're 2 hours from the first hegemony system. Fleet Command is requesting final orders." James set down the photograph. "My mother spent her entire career preparing for this day. She trained me personally from the time I could walk. Do you know what she told me before we launched?" "No, sir." "She said that what we do in the next few weeks will define humanity forever. We can be destroyers or liberators, monsters or saviors. The hegemony will not give us a choice about whether to fight, but they cannot take away our choice about who to be while we fight." He stood and straightened his uniform. "Signal the fleet. We will destroy their military capabilities. We will free every human in their space, but we will not murder civilians. We will not torture prisoners. We will not become what we are fighting. And if they surrender..." James thought about the footage of dying for the crime of asking to be treated as a person. "Then they will face justice, real justice, not revenge, not slaughter, justice." The fleet dropped out of FTL at the edge of hegemony space. 12,000 ships in the first wave, positioned around a military outpost that had never seen an enemy attack. The humans did not announce themselves. They did not demand surrender. They did not explain why they had come. They simply opened fire. And the hegemony began to learn what happened when you hurt humanity's children. High Commander stood on the observation deck of his flagship and watched the new slaves being processed on Prime below. The planet was a military hub, home to 200 hegemony warships and the largest slave processing facility in the sector. The humans from the recently acquired colony were proving to be satisfactory workers. They were weaker than some species, but they learned quickly and rarely tried to escape. After the first few public executions, they had become properly obedient. Was pleased with his work. The acquisition had been smooth, the resources minimal, the results excellent. The Supreme himself had sent a message of congratulations. His communications officer interrupted his thoughts. "Commander, we are detecting sensor anomalies at the edge of the system." Did not look away from the planet below. "What kind of anomalies?" "Multiple FTL signatures, several thousand, possibly more." Now turned, frowning. "Several thousand, that is impossible. No fleet is that large. Check your equipment." "We have checked, Commander. The signatures are increasing. We are now reading over 8,000 contacts." Walked quickly to the command center. His officers were staring at their displays with expressions of confusion and growing fear. "This must be a sensor malfunction," announced. The largest fleet in hegemony history was 3,000 ships. No species could field. 12,000 contacts, Commander. They are all dropping out of FTL now. The main display flickered and then showed something that could not understand. Ships were appearing everywhere, hundreds per second, spreading across the system like a plague. They were dark and angular, built without grace or beauty, covered in weapons that glowed with barely contained energy. "Hail them," ordered, his voice less steady than before. "Demand identification." "No response, Commander. They are not acknowledging any communications." "Then prepare for battle. All ships to defensive positions. Launch all fighters. Activate the orbital defense platforms." The 200 hegemony warships moved into formation with practiced precision. They had never lost a battle. They had crushed a dozen species who dared to resist hegemony rule. They were the finest military force in the galaxy. The human fleet did not slow down. It did not spread into attack formations. It simply came straight at them like a wall of metal and fire. "They outnumber us 60 to 1, someone whispered. "Numbers mean nothing against hegemony technology," said firmly. "Our shields are superior. Our weapons are superior. We will." The first human weapons fired. Had never seen anything like them. Massive kinetic projectiles, accelerated to a fraction of light speed, slammed into the hegemony formation. Shields that had never failed began to flicker and die under the sustained assault. "Return fire. All ships return fire." Hegemony weapons were elegant and precise. They fired beams of focused energy that could cut through enemy hulls with surgical accuracy. They struck the human ships and did almost nothing. "Commander, their armor is absorbing our weapons." "Impossible. Increase power to the main batteries." "We are at maximum power, Commander. Their ships are still advancing." Watched in horror as his fleet began to die. Hegemony ships, beautiful and proud, exploded one after another as human projectiles tore through them. The humans did not target engines or weapon systems. They did not try to disable or capture. Every shot was aimed at the core of each ship, designed to kill as quickly as possible. A human ship took a direct hit from 3 hegemony cruisers. Its armor cracked and burned, but it kept coming, weapons still firing, crashing directly into the nearest hegemony vessel and destroying both in a massive explosion. "They rammed us," someone said in disbelief. "They sacrificed their own ship to destroy ours." "They are insane," another officer whispered. Understood now, too late, what they were facing. This was not a battle between military forces. This was not a conflict over territory or resources. This was extermination. The humans had not come to win. They had come to destroy. "All ships retreat. Fall back to the secondary defensive line." But there was no secondary line. Human ships were everywhere now, surrounding the hegemony fleet, cutting off every escape route. The battle had become a slaughter. 4 hours after it began, the last hegemony warship exploded. Not a single ship had escaped. Not a single distress call had gotten through. 200 of the finest vessels in the hegemony fleet had been erased from existence. But the humans were not finished. Drop ships descended on Prime like rain. Thousands of them, carrying soldiers in black armor that made them look like machines. They landed at every military base, every government building, every slave processing center. Private First Class Maria Santos was 22 years old. She had never been in real combat before this day. Her hands were shaking as her squad approached the main slave facility. Sergeant David noticed. "First time is always hard. Remember your training, remember why we are here." "I remember," Maria said. She thought about the footage they had all seen, the children being taken from their parents, the old people marked for death. "I remember." The facility doors were locked. David nodded to the squad's heavy weapons specialist, who attached a breaching charge. The explosion tore the doors apart like paper. Inside, guards were waiting. They opened fire immediately, their weapons flashing with deadly light. Private fell, his chest smoking from a direct hit. Maria did not think. She moved on instinct, years of training taking over. Her rifle fired in short, controlled bursts. One guard fell, then another. Her squad advanced, room by room, level by level. They found the slaves on the third level. Thousands of humans, packed into cells barely large enough to stand in. They looked up at the armored figures with terror in their eyes. Maria removed her helmet. "We are human," she said, her voice breaking. "We are from Earth. We have come to take you home." For a moment there was silence. Then a woman in the nearest cell began to cry. Others joined her. The sound of weeping filled the facility, a sound of relief and disbelief and hope. "Get them out," David ordered. "Every cell, every level. No one gets left behind." The liberation of Prime took 3 days. Every military installation was destroyed. Every hegemony official was captured or killed. Every slave was freed. On the final day, Maria stood guard while the last transport ships loaded with freed humans. A young civilian approached the security line, hands raised in surrender. "Please," the alien said. "I am not military, I am not government, I am just a merchant. I never hurt any slaves. Please do not kill me." Maria studied the alien for a long moment. She thought about dead in the facility. She thought about the cells full of humans who had been treated like animals. She raised her weapon. Then she lowered it. "Run home," she said quietly. "Tell your leaders what you saw here. Tell them this is just the beginning. Tell them we are coming for all of it." The merchant ran. On the bridge of the Prometheus Reborn, Admiral received the final reports from Prime. 87,000 humans liberated. 12 hegemony systems secured. Enemy losses total and complete. Human losses, 4,000 dead, 9,000 wounded. James closed his eyes for a moment. 4,000 families would receive notification of death. 4,000 empty chairs at dinner tables. 4,000 graves that would be dug on liberated worlds. "Sir," Commander said softly, "it is a victory." "I know," James opened his eyes. "Signal the fleet. We advance to the next system, and the next, and the next, until every human in hegemony space is free. And after that..." James looked at the star charts showing hegemony territory. Billions of slaves of 100 species waiting for liberation. "After that, we finish what we started." The fleet moved on, leaving Prime behind. But before they left, they deployed a single satellite in orbit. It broadcast a message in every known language, on every frequency. "The humans have come. If you are enslaved, hold on. We are coming for you." Across hegemony space, billions of beings heard the message. For the first time in generations, they began to hope. And the hegemony began to feel something they had never felt before. Fear. The throne room of Prime had not changed in 3,000 years. Golden walls stretched toward a ceiling painted with scenes of hegemony triumphs. Crystal chandeliers cast soft light across floors of polished stone. At the far end, on a throne carved from a single massive gem, sat Supreme. Had ruled for 200 years. He had overseen the conquest of 12 species. He had expanded the hegemony's borders further than any before him. He was considered the greatest leader in history. Now he sat in silence, watching reports of disaster scroll across his personal display. 12 border systems have gone dark, his military advisor reported. All communication has been lost. All fleets stationed in those systems have been destroyed. "How is this possible?" asked quietly. "Who is attacking us?" We believe they are humans," Supreme One looked up sharply. "Humans, the primitives we centuries ago, the species that had barely reached their own moon." Yes, Supreme One. We have recovered visual records from damaged satellites. The attacking ships are definitely human in design, and the advisor hesitated. Speaker. They are broadcasting messages in human languages, demanding the release of all human slaves, promising to destroy any military force that resists. Stood slowly from his throne. He walked to the great windows that overlooked his capital city. Below, millions went about their daily lives, unaware that their empire was burning. Show me the fleet that destroyed Prime. The display changed to satellite footage from the battle. Watched in silence as 12,000 human ships annihilated 200 hegemony vessels in 4 hours. He saw human ships take massive damage and keep fighting. He saw human ships deliberately crash into hegemony vessels, sacrificing themselves for a single kill. They are insane, someone whispered behind him. No, said softly. They are angry, there is a difference. He turned back to his advisors. How many ships do they have? Intelligence estimates suggest 40,000 warships, possibly more. 40,000. Let the number sink in. The entire hegemony navy is 10,000 ships. They outnumber us 4-1. Supreme One, we should open diplomatic channels, negotiate, offer reparations for the humans we have taken. This conflict serves no. Do you think they want negotiation? Gestured at the footage still playing on the display. Look at them. They have not sent a single message to us. They do not respond to any communication. They simply destroy everything in their path and move on. Then what do we do? Was silent for a long moment. He thought about the history of his species, the 12,000 years of conquest and domination. He thought about the 100 species they had enslaved, the billions of lives they had controlled and consumed. He thought about what he would do if someone had done that to his people. Mobilize everything, he said finally. Every ship, every soldier, every weapon we have. We will meet them in the void at the edge of our core systems. We will show them that the hegemony does not fall. 6,000 light-years away, Admiral James reviewed the intelligence reports with his senior officers. They are gathering their entire fleet, Commander noted. 10,000 ships converging on a single point. Good, James said. Better to destroy them all at once than hunt them down system by system. Sir, even with our advantage, we will take heavy casualties. Thousands of ships, millions of lives. James nodded slowly. He pulled up a different file on his display, one he had looked at every day since the campaign began. This is the list of every human killed or enslaved by the hegemony. 847,000 names. Men, women, children, farmers and teachers and scientists and artists, all of them dead or in chains because the hegemony decided they were less than people. He looked around the table at his officers. The hegemony had 12,000 years to build something good, 12,000 years to treat other species with respect and dignity. Instead, they built an empire of slavery and suffering. They were not always this way, someone said quietly. Historical records suggest the early hegemony was more benevolent. Then somewhere along the way they chose to become monsters. James closed the file. Choices have consequences. This is theirs. The two fleets met in a region of empty space called the Void of. There were no planets here, no stars, nothing but darkness and the cold light of distant galaxies. 40,000 human ships faced 10,000 hegemony vessels across a gap of several million kilometers. For a long moment, neither side moved. Then's voice broadcast across all frequencies. Humans, I am supreme. I propose a ceasefire. Return to your own space. We will release all human slaves and pay whatever reparations you demand. There is no need for more death. The human fleet did not respond with words. Instead, a single data packet was transmitted to the hegemony flagship. Opened it and found a list of names. 847,000 names. Every human who had died or been enslaved since the Prometheus colony was discovered, every child torn from their parents, every elder marked for death, every worker who had collapsed in hegemony mines. The humans had remembered all of them. Understood then, this was not a war of conquest. This was not a conflict over territory or resources. This was judgment. This was revenge. This was the universe finally demanding payment for 12,000 years of cruelty. All ships, he ordered quietly, attack. The Battle of the Void was the largest military engagement in galactic history. 10,000 hegemony ships charged into 40,000 human vessels. The space between them filled with weapons fire, explosions, debris. Hegemony tactics were sophisticated and refined, developed over of warfare. They tried to divide the human fleet, to isolate smaller groups and destroy them in detail. They used their superior maneuverability to avoid human weapons and strike at vulnerable points. None of it worked. The humans did not fight like any enemy the hegemony had ever faced. They did not try to minimize their losses. They did not retreat when damaged. They did not surrender when surrounded. They simply kept fighting, kept killing, kept advancing. A hegemony cruiser crippled a human destroyer, leaving it drifting and helpless. Standard doctrine said to move on to the next target. Instead, the human ship overloaded its reactor and detonated, destroying the cruiser that had wounded it. A squadron of hegemony fighters cornered a human transport carrying wounded. The transport's captain rammed his ship into the lead fighter, clearing a path for other human ships to escape. They do not fear death, a hegemony officer reported in horror. They welcome it if it means taking us with them. Then give them what they want, replied grimly. Keep fighting. But the numbers were too great, the human determination too absolute. Hour by hour the hegemony fleet shrank, ships exploded, escape pods were launched, distress calls went unanswered. After 18 hours of continuous battle, the hegemony fleet broke. Ships began to flee in all directions, abandoning formation, abandoning strategy, simply running for their lives. Most did not make it far. When the Battle of the Void ended, 6,000 hegemony ships had been destroyed. The survivors scattered across the galaxy, too damaged and demoralized to fight. Human losses were heavy, 8,000 ships destroyed, 15,000 damaged, but the human fleet was still intact, still functional, still coming. On the bridge of the Prometheus Reborn, Admiral watched the final hegemony ships flee into FTL. Pursue them, Commander asked. No, let them run. Let them spread the word about what happened here. James turned to the navigation display showing the path to Prime. We have somewhere else to be. 12,000 human warships dropped out of FTL in orbit around the hegemony. They formed a perfect sphere, blocking every possible escape route, their weapons trained on the planet below. On the surface, billions looked up at the sky and saw their doom hanging above them. In his throne room received the reports with quiet acceptance. His fleet was destroyed. His empire was crumbling. His people were trapped. They have not fired on the planet, his advisor noted. They have not attacked civilian targets. Perhaps they wish to negotiate after all. Shook his head slowly. No, they are waiting for something. Waiting for what? For me to understand what is about to happen, for me to feel what all those humans felt when we took everything from them. Looked out at his city one last time. They want me to be afraid. He was. For the first time in 200 years of rule, Supreme was truly afraid. Above the planet, Admiral prepared his first and only message to the hegemony. This is Admiral James of the Terran Confederacy. You built an empire on the suffering of others. Now you will face the consequences. We are the consequence. The human fleet hung in orbit around Prime like a ring of steel. 12,000 ships, each one carrying enough firepower to level a city. Below them, 5 billion waited for the end. Admiral James stood on the observation deck of the Prometheus Reborn and looked down at the planet. It was beautiful, he had to admit. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds drifting across a world that had known peace for. His officers waited behind him, expecting orders. They had come so far, lost so many friends, destroyed so much. The entire fleet was ready to finish what they had started. Every weapon was charged. Every targeting system was locked. One order would turn that beautiful world into a graveyard. "Sir," Commander said quietly, "the crew is asking about our plans. The ground invasion force is ready. Orbital bombardment platforms are in position." James did not turn around. "What do you think we should do?" Hesitated. "We came here to end the hegemony, to make sure they never hurt anyone again." "That is not what I asked. I asked what you think we should do." For a long moment was silent. Then she said, "My grandmother was born in a refugee camp. Her parents had fled their homeland during a war. She told me stories about what she saw there, the hunger, the fear, the way people treated each other when they thought no one was watching." "What does that have to do with this?" "She also told me about the people who helped them, strangers who shared food when they had nothing, doctors who worked without sleep, soldiers who protected civilians instead of killing them." Paused. "She said that crisis reveals who people really are. It strips away the pretending." James finally turned to face her. "And who are we?" "I do not know yet. I think that depends on what happens next." The ground invasion began at dawn local time. Human drop ships descended on the capital city, landing at military bases, government buildings, communication centers. But they did not destroy. They did not kill. They secured. Supreme watched from his throne room window as human soldiers marched through his streets. They moved with discipline and purpose, weapons ready but not firing. Civilians who fled were ignored. Those who attacked were disarmed, not killed. It was not what he had expected. The throne room doors opened, and human soldiers entered. They were enormous in their black armor, faces hidden behind reflective visors. Behind them walked a tall human man with gray in his hair and exhaustion in his eyes. "Supreme," Admiral said, "you are under arrest for crimes against humanity and other sentient species. You will face trial. You will have the opportunity to defend yourself. If convicted, you will serve whatever sentence is determined by the court." Rose from his throne slowly. "You have won. Your fleet surrounds my world. Your soldiers control my capital. Why do you not simply kill me and be done with it?" "Because you expected us to kill you." James gestured, and his soldiers stepped aside, leaving a clear path to the door. "Walk with me." They walked through the palace, past servants who cowered against walls, past human soldiers who stood at silent attention. They emerged onto a balcony overlooking the city. James activated a holographic display. Images appeared in the air, human children running through fields on newly liberated colony worlds, families reuniting after years of separation, old men and women taking their first steps as free people. "These are the humans you enslaved," James said. 80,000 lives that you treated as property, 37 that you murdered to make an example. Watch the images in silence. "We have the power to destroy this world," James continued. "Every ship in my fleet would happily give their lives to glass this planet and everyone on it. We could end the species today, right now, and there is nothing you could do to stop us." "Then why do you not?" James turned to face them directly. "Because the people who died in your slave camps deserved better than what you gave them, and we will be what they deserved. We will be better." "I do not understand." "No, you do not." James pointed at the city below, where human soldiers were distributing medical supplies to civilians. "You built an empire of fear and cruelty because you believed strength meant domination. You thought being powerful meant making others weak." He lowered his hand. We spent 200 years becoming the most powerful military force in the galaxy, and we will use that power to build something new, something you never could have created. What is that? Justice, actual justice, not revenge dressed up in pretty words, not cruelty hidden behind laws, real justice, where people are held accountable for what they have done but given the chance to become something better. The trial lasted 3 months. The evidence was overwhelming. Centuries of records documenting slavery, torture, genocide, and systematic cruelty. Witnesses from a dozen species about their suffering under hegemony rule. Was found guilty. His sentence was not death. It was a lifetime of service, working to repair the damage he had caused, confronting every day the consequences of his choices. Some thought it was too lenient. Some thought it was too harsh. But it was decided by a court of judges from every species the hegemony had conquered, humans and former slaves together. It was justice. The hegemony was dissolved. In its place, a new federation arose, guided by human advisors but governed by representatives of all species. Former slaves became citizens. Former masters learned what it meant to treat others as equals. It was not easy. It was not quick. There were setbacks and failures and moments when it seemed like the hatred would never end. But slowly things changed. 50 years after the fall of the hegemony, a memorial was built on 442b, where the Prometheus colony had once stood. It was a simple structure, a single human figure with one hand reaching toward the stars. Around it, gardens bloomed with plants from 100 worlds. Children of every species played among the flowers, their laughter filling the air. A young girl approached a human woman who sat on a bench near the statue. The woman was old now, her hair white, her face lined with years of hard work and harder choices. "Teacher," the girl asked, "why is the statue reaching up like that?" Granddaughter of the colony director who had died on this very ground, looked at the statue she had helped design. "Because humans never stop reaching," she said. "Even when everything is dark, even when everyone tells us to give up, we reach for something better." But the history books say humans were very angry when they came. They destroyed so many ships. They killed so many soldiers. Yes, we were angry. We had every right to be angry. Looked at the child, this young whose grandparents had once ruled an empire of slaves. But anger is only the beginning. It tells you something is wrong. It does not tell you how to make it right. What does tell you how to make it right? Smiled and put her arm around the girl. Love, patience, the willingness to believe that people can change, the determination to build something worth protecting. She looked up at the statue, at the hand reaching forever toward the stars. "We could have destroyed your people," she said quietly. "Every human who survived that war would tell you the same thing. We wanted to. In our darkest moments, we wanted nothing more than to make them suffer the way we had suffered. Why did you not? Because the people we lost deserved better than to be remembered as the reason for a genocide. They deserved to be remembered as the foundation of something new, something good." The girl was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I am glad you did not destroy us." "So am I." They sat together as the sun set over the memorial, human and teacher and student, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, human ships still patrolled the old hegemony borders, keeping the peace. Human teachers still worked in schools across the Federation, training the next generation. Human doctors still healed the sick. Human engineers still built new worlds. Human diplomats still worked to hold the fragile alliance together. They had come to the galaxy as conquerors, as destroyers, as the vengeance of a people who had been wronged. But they stayed as something else. They stayed as hope. And in the end, that was worth more than all the weapons in the universe. On the memorial, an inscription was carved in 100 languages. It was the last message sent by Thomas, the old historian who had activated the beacon before being taken to his death. It read simply, "We are still here, do not forget us." Humanity had not forgotten. Humanity never would.